People are always concerned about storms when you're on a boat, and that's fair enough. However, when you're on a sailboat and have the option of heaving to, it kind of changes your perception of what is or is not a storm. So I was going to share with you in this video some cases for heaving to, not only in a storm situation but in others, that are very helpful when you have a sailboat. Simply slowing down is a very useful case for heaving to. When you're trying to go fast or you're stuck going fast, you're more likely to break things. It's more stressful. Just recently we went from here in Fiji, from Yandua to Yasawa. In retrospect, it could have been done in the morning. We could have left in the morning, but I thought it was too far to make it by nightfall. I didn't want to be stressed about having to go too fast and maybe not being able to go fast enough because not enough wind or something. As it turns out, this happens to be an acceleration zone between the two big islands of Fiji. So what is normally 15 to 20 knots turns out in this area to be more like 30 to 40 knots. And then there happens to be this fringing barrier reef along here in the middle, full of little obstacles and islands and steep waves because it's shallower. So we were coming out of here and didn't make it outside where I was just going to do long tacks and around, but flying in steep waves at hull speed in this boat with the smallest sail area we have up front. So what was the solution for not being stuck here at midnight, having to be blown off course or looking for an anchor in the dark when you can't see in the shallow reefs? It was heaving to. We simply just hove to on the starboard tack for a little while before running into something. Then we just jibed and went on the port tack for a while. So we ended up zigzagging. By sunrise, it was safe to get out of this reef and tuck in around and set anchor. So it's simply being able to slow down and control made this a relatively safe passage. What could have been very dangerous. And so we basically got down to 2 to 3 knots. That was the slowest we could get because the current and the wind was just ripping through there. Storms are another good case for heaving to. And sometimes I think it's common knowledge, but it must not be, because I'm always hearing of people, it seems more common that people try to outrun the storm, which, causes things to break and causes stress, like we just talked about. And they still don't do it, because I still hear about people running bare-poled in storms without any sails up at all. So I think maybe it's just lack of practice or lack of comfort. Maybe haven't had much experience heaving to. So I'm going to share with you a couple reasons that are worth creating and making yourself experience heaving to. So look into a couple very documented sailboat races, multi-day sailboat races. In 1979, there's a fast net race. It's every year. Fast net race goes around England. It's multi-days. In 1979, a lot of boats were lost and a lot of people died. 1998, there was a Sydney Hobart. In that race, which is also multi-decades old, well documented, both of these races, in the Sydney Hobart race in 1998, a lot of people died and a lot of boats were lost. However, if you look at both of these races, none of the boats that chose to heave to had problems. The people lived without injuries, and the boats continued on, made it where they wanted to go. So there's a reason for practicing and getting comfortable heaving to, just for pure safety reasons and being able to relax. When you're in a storm, it's less likely to be a storm or feel like a storm when you're hove to, just going with the storm, just going with the waves. That's it. It's not really a storm. Most of the time you're just kind of going with the flow. So it's less, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's less likely to feel like a storm when you're hove to. Which comes up to the next case for heaving to. It's just for taking a break. Maybe it's a snack break or a lunch break during a day sail. So when you think about it, the sea, I always think that the sea state lags the wind, which is one thing worth thinking about when you're heaving to. So let's say the wind is turning clockwise. So it's going from the west to more northwest to north. What that's going to do is make the wind come from there, and the sea state lags the wind. So the sea is more likely to be coming like that. So that, you think about that and you realize that and you go, well, you have two options, heaving to port or starboard. What do you think would be more comfortable? If that's the front of the boat and you're hove to on port, or you could be hove to on starboard. It's your choice. And the wind's coming down here and the waves are coming from there. Well, if you're hove to on the port side, you can see the waves are going to be more on your beam. And if you're hove to on the starboard side, then the waves are going to be more on the bow. So obviously you're going to want to heave to. I guess it's not obvious, maybe you want to, but it's going to be more comfortable in the wave action if you heave to on the starboard side. That's worth thinking about. It's another thing, when you heave to, you need two sails. So the forward sail is going to keep you from tacking accidentally. And then the aft sail is going to help you to basically adjust the boat. Like if you're on, we'll look at this one, that's on the starboard tack. So if he takes his aft sail and sheets it in more, then he's going to have the bow more into the wind. And if he sheets his aft sail out, then the bow's going to be more off the wind. I always just leave the tiller alone. So the result is, and this is the same with sail area. If you have more sail area up front, think of balance. More sail area up front is going to put the bow more off the wind. More sail area aft is going to put the bow more into the wind. So the end result is you basically have, when you're hove to, between port and starboard tacks, you can go pretty much this whole range. You can drift slowly back on this whole range of about 45, 90 degrees of just drifting, slowly drifting down. It may be harder straight downwind, but you can. It's just less comfortable in the wave. Just get beam to. And then it's, because the sails are keeping the boat heeled over, it's more comfortable. You're going with the flow, and you basically have a lot of control over how you, like in that Yandua to Yasawa, I had a lot of control over how we drifted slowly so that we did not hit any obstacles. A good example of using the balance and that control was when I sailed into Golden Bay in the north end of North Island a couple years ago. And that's like this, very exposed, and I got distracted by some fishing boats for a few hours and pulled around here, pulled into here just after sunset as the wind started picking up to 20, 25 knots. And I really wanted to go down into here. There's this place, what is it? Tarakohe. And there's no other options. It wouldn't have been an option. Without heaving to, I wouldn't have been able to get there because there's like only 10 miles between there. So I blew the whole night, drifting only those 10 miles, playing around with different heaving to strategies and different sail balance and different sail area. And I ended up going up here and drifting and setting things up so that we were maybe by the time 6 or 7, 8 miles from there, we were drifting at less than 1 knot directly to there. So I crashed. You can never really completely relax, because even if you're drifting as slow as 1 knot or less, you got to keep your eyes open. So it's still worth setting the alarm and keep looking out and see what's going on. In this case, it wasn't on the chart I was using, but in this case, I kept noticing a light. And we were drifting slowly. You know, I see it every hour. I see it getting closer and closer, going, wow, somebody is actually managing to drift slower than we are. It's not easy to go only 1 knot or less in 29 or 25 knots of wind. So, luckily, kind of luckily, in watching it get closer, just about morning twilight, I noticed that that was a light marking a huge fish farm. And it was only a couple 100 meters away by the time, you know, I could see it in the light. So we luckily, you know, got it and skirted around and could resume sailing to where we wanted to go. But, you know, I guess it's the case of, even when you're going really slow, virtually parked, hove to, you still got to use your eyes. It's worth using your eyes. Another thing worth being aware of when you're hove to, seemingly going nowhere, is currents. I remember another time, I don't remember which 2 islands, but it was going from one island to the other in the Canaries. And it was too far to do in the day, so similarly, went in the late afternoon, left this one island, and got into the other island too early. So we got here too early, no worries, hove to. Drifting right to here where we wanted to go. And luckily I set the alarm and was getting up every 30, 60 minutes or less. And before the alarm went off once, I felt the motion. Don't ignore an odd motion or an odd feeling. That's another one. But what happened, because it's kind of like, it's not just the wind that accelerates between islands, you know, goes through dead zones in some areas or bends around or accelerates, but the currents do the same exact thing. You just can't see them, but the boat feels them. In this case, the boat, instead of drifting down here like I thought, it drifted into this northern part of the island, right into the rocks. And that motion I was feeling were waves picking up just before they were breaking. So I popped my head up out of the hatch to see this huge rock wall and breaking waves only a stone's throw away. So it was 30 seconds later, the boat would have been lost. But luckily, you know, I just sparked up the motor and turned and got out, you know, in the nick of time. So that's just something to be aware of. You know, it's, the currents are a catch-up. Watch out for currents. And heaving to is actually a very simple, safe thing that's, I think it's underutilized only because it's less used. People have less experience with it. So like anything, you know, lack of familiarity brings on lack of comfort. So I would recommend practicing heaving to so that you're comfortable, and it's a very valuable strategy that you can use for sailing around. So I hope this helps. Keep having fun. Over and out.